Episode Why teenagers stop trusting their parents. What happens when a child who once told you everything suddenly tells you nothing? When the same teenager who once ran into your arms now locks their door, not out of rebellion, but protection? What happens when trust between parent and child fades, not with shouting, but with silence? Before we explore the chilling facts behind this situation, welcome to Responsible Parenting TVC, Responsible Parenting Tips for Caring Kids. Here, we share raw, uncensored, and deeply relatable parenting stories, practical tips, proven strategies, and inspiring lessons to help you raise responsible, confident, and caring children in today's world. Disclaimer: this is an educational content for knowledge and awareness only. Again, I ask you, what happens when a child who once told you everything suddenly tells you nothing? When the same teenager who once ran into your arms now locks their door, not out of rebellion, but protection? What happens when trust between parent and child fades, not with shouting, but with silence? In this episode of Responsible Parenting TVC, we dive into one of the deepest emotional wounds in modern families: why teenagers stop trusting their parents. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe now. If you're on Facebook, follow our page, like, comment, and share this video with others who need to hear this truth. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell, because every episode here could save a home, a heart, or a marriage. It began in Lagos, Nigeria, but it could have been anywhere. 15-year-old Tomiwa was once the kind of son every parent prayed for: bright, respectful, always smiling. His mother, Ngozi, adored him. His father, Kunle, called him "my future engineer." But lately, something had changed. Tomiwa barely spoke. He stopped joining family prayers, spent more time online, and locked himself in his room for hours. "Ngozi," Kunle said one night, frustrated, "the boy is losing focus. I need to discipline him before he loses direction." But Ngozi hesitated. "Kunle, what if he's not being stubborn? What if he's hurting?" Her husband scoffed. "You're too soft. Children this age don't need pampering. They need structure." That night, Tomiwa overheard everything from behind his bedroom door. He didn't cry. He just whispered to himself, "They'll never understand." The next day, Kunle barged into Tomiwa's room. "Why are your grades dropping? Why do you keep avoiding us?" But Tomiwa just stared at the floor. "Answer me!" Kunle shouted. Silence. In that silence, something broke. Not in the father's authority, but in the boy's trust. It wasn't that Tomiwa didn't love his parents. He just stopped believing they could handle his truth. You see, teenagers don't stop trusting their parents overnight. It begins with small moments: a shouted correction instead of a listening ear, a broken promise that said, "You can tell me anything," followed by judgment when they actually did. Weeks turned into months. Tomiwa started spending time with new friends online, people who listened, validated him, and never told him he was too sensitive. Ngozi began to worry. Her once cheerful son had become emotionally distant, withdrawn, secretive, and when she finally tried to talk to him one evening, he said words that pierced her heart. "Mom, I love you, but I don't trust you." She froze. Her tears came quickly, not from anger, but helplessness. She whispered, "What have I done wrong?" But Tomiwa had already walked away, and that's when Ngozi realized the walls she and Kunle built in the name of discipline had become barriers to love. Because when communication turns into control, children stop speaking. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they fear the consequences of saying it. But what happens when the truth finally comes out? If you're touched by this story, comment "Marriage with Wisdom," share it with loved ones, and subscribe for more real-life stories that heal hearts on Responsible Parenting TVC. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell. The next part might just change how you see love forever. The silence in Ngozi's home had become deafening. Days turned into weeks, and Tomiwa barely spoke to anyone. He went to school, came back, locked his room, the rhythm of a boy slowly slipping away. One night, Ngozi stood by his door, hand trembling. She wanted to knock, but fear held her back. Fear that he wouldn't answer. Fear that she no longer knew how to reach him. When she finally knocked, her voice cracked. "Tomiwa, can we talk?" There was a pause, then a faint reply. "About what, Mum? You'll just tell me I'm wrong again." Those words cut deep. She wanted to say no, "I won't," but she couldn't promise that truthfully, so instead she whispered, "Please, I just want to listen." The door opened slowly. For the first time in months, their eyes met. A mother filled with guilt and a son filled with confusion. They sat in silence for several minutes before Tomiwa finally spoke. "Mom, do you know what it feels like when your own parents don't believe in you? When everything you say becomes an argument?" Ngozi blinked away tears. "I was only trying to protect you, Tomiwa." He shook his head. "No, you were trying to control me." His words echoed through the room, and suddenly Ngozi wasn't looking at her son anymore. She was looking at her younger self. She remembered her own mother's voice, sharp, unforgiving, always certain. "Ngozi, children don't talk back. Stop crying before I give you something to cry about." "You think you know better than me?" As those memories resurfaced, Ngozi realized she had become the very voice she once feared. She had mistaken authority for connection. She had confused obedience with trust. That night, she cried quietly beside her sleeping son, and in the stillness she whispered a prayer, not for him to change, but for her to learn how to love differently. The next morning, something shifted. Instead of her usual, "Tomiwa, why are you always on your phone?" she asked. "Who are you chatting with today? Are they your friends from school?" He looked at her suspiciously at first, but when she didn't scold or interrupt, he began to talk. Just a little. And that little was everything. You see, rebuilding trust isn't about grand gestures. It's about consistent humility. It's about learning to listen without judgment, to guide without control, to parent from empathy, not ego. Days passed, and Ngozi started doing the hardest work of all, self-reflection. She enrolled in a parenting class at church, watched family therapy videos online, and began journaling her emotions. One entry read, "I always thought parenting was about shaping the child, but now I see it's about reshaping myself." One evening, she called Kunle into the bedroom. "Kunle, we need to change how we talk to him. He's shutting down because we keep talking at him, not with him." Her husband frowned. "Ngozi, you're letting emotions rule you. Boys need firmness." She looked him in the eye. "Firmness without empathy breaks them." He fell silent. Something in her tone, calm yet resolute, made him realize she wasn't just emotional. She was evolving. The next day, Kunle tried to reach out. "Son, let's watch the match together tonight." Tomiwa hesitated, then nodded. For the first time in months, they laughed. Not as father and son locked in battle, but as two humans slowly finding their way back. But healing is never linear, because just as things were beginning to change, An unexpected discovery shook everything. Ngozi found a hidden note under Tomiwa's pillow, one that revealed the secret he had been carrying all along. It read, "Sometimes I wish I could disappear, not because I hate you, but because I'm tired of not being enough." Her hands trembled, her breath caught, and in that moment, Ngozi realized this wasn't just about parenting anymore. This was about saving a life before it's too late. But what happens when the truth finally comes out? If you're touched by this story, comment Marriage with Wisdom, share it with loved ones, and subscribe for more real-life stories that heal hearts on Responsible Parenting TVC. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell. The next part might just change how you see love forever. Ngozi sat on the edge of Tomiwa's bed, gripping the folded note in her trembling hand. Her world had slowed down to a whisper. Every word from that paper echoed in her chest. "I wish I could disappear." She stared at her son's empty desk, his half-finished assignments, and the photo from his 10th birthday, where his smile was wide and innocent. How did they get here? How did love, meant to protect, become the very thing that pushed him into silence? That night she didn't sleep. At dawn she woke her husband, Kunle, her eyes swollen with tears. "Kunle, our son is hurting more than we knew. We almost lost him. Not to the world, but to our own blindness." He blinked, confused. She handed him the note. When he read it, his shoulders sank. The proud, disciplined father who once believed in tough love now looked like a man whose strength had betrayed him. He whispered, "I didn't know he felt this way." And Ngozi answered softly, "Neither did I, because we never really asked." That morning, they called Tomiwa into the living room. He came out cautiously, sensing something heavy in the air. Kunle's voice trembled as he said, "Son, I found your note." Tomiwa froze. Shame flickered across his face. "You weren't supposed to see that." Ngozi reached for his hand. "We're glad we did, sweetheart, because now we know the truth, and we want to make things right." Tears filled his eyes. For months he had carried the weight of feeling unseen. Now, for the first time, he was being heard. As the three of them sat together, Tomiwa finally opened up. "Mom, Dad, every time you shouted at me, I felt like I wasn't enough, like nothing I did could make you proud. When I failed that test, I didn't need a lecture. I needed to know I was still loved." The room fell silent. Ngozi broke down in tears. "Oh, my son, I'm so sorry. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, but I was teaching you to hide your pain. I made you fear love." Kunle's voice cracked. "And I made you feel like mistakes were a crime. I forgot that discipline without compassion is destruction." That conversation became the beginning of healing. Not the easy kind, but the kind that takes humility, courage, and truth. Ngozi and Kunle began family therapy. They learned about emotional intelligence, that every child, no matter how old, needs connection more than correction. They learned that listening builds trust faster than lecturing. Tomiwa, in turn, began to open up little by little. He joined his school's music club again, started smiling more, and even hugged his parents, something he hadn't done in months. One Sunday, during a church parenting seminar, Ngozi shared her story. She said, "We were raising our son with fear disguised as love. But real love doesn't punish, it understands. Real love doesn't silence, it listens." Her words touched every parent in that hall because too many of them had been repeating the same pattern, parenting from their pain instead of from their peace. You see, the truth about parenting is this: Broken parents often raise broken children until one generation decides to break the cycle, and Ngozi became that generation. She learned that healing your child begins with healing yourself, that the greatest apology isn't just "I'm sorry," but "I'm changing." Months later, Tomiwa turned 16. He stood beside his parents during family prayer and said something that made Ngozi's heart melt. "Mom, Dad, thank you for finally seeing me. You taught me that love is not about perfection. It's about presence." There was no audience, no applause, just tears of grace and the quiet sound of hearts mending. Ngozi whispered a simple prayer that day. "God, teach me to raise my child with love that listens and discipline that heals." Reflection. Parents often forget that children remember everything, not the lectures, but the tone, the silence, the eyes that look disappointed instead of kind. And teenagers, they don't stop trusting because they are rebellious. They stop trusting because they feel unheard. So the next time your child pulls away, don't chase them with correction. Sit with them in compassion, because love that listens heals generations. Final thought. May every parent watching this learn to trade shouting for understanding and control for connection. Because when trust returns, the home breathes again. This is Responsible Parenting TVC. Responsible Parenting Tips for Caring Kids. Stay with us for more inspiring parenting lessons, powerful real-life stories, and daily guidance to help you raise children who are caring, responsible, and ready to thrive.